When you think about breathwork and when you talk to people about breathwork, it's this whole, hour-long session of like laying down and, maybe sound baths are included. And it's like this whole thing. But for me, it's all the moments in between those. It's every single day,
Hello, welcome to Authentically Aligned, a wellness podcast where we speak on all things wellness, from fitness and nutrition to meditation and mindfulness, healing, growth, self-help, and so much more. If you are a new listener, welcome to the podcast. And if you are a returning listener, thank you so much for your love and support. And I want you to know that I'm sending you that same love and support right back. Today, I am so excited because it has been a minute since we have had a guest on the show, but we have a very special guest on today. He is a cold plunge mentor turned friend, and he is a master of all. He is a business owner. He is a ACE certified personal trainer, an extreme performance training breath coach, a level 2 precision nutrition coach, and also known as the holistic hustler. He and I share very similar mindsets when it comes to wellness, and I think that we both would agree that we share a very similar passion. I am so fortunate to get to witness him sharing his passion for wellness with others, and I am incredibly grateful to have him on the show today. Please welcome to the mic, Jacob Saldana. All right, welcome.
Thanks.
How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. It's been a nice, kind of a late start to the morning, but got the coffee in, checking the typical boxes. So
Nice.
I'm feeling good. Thanks for having me.
Let's go. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
So I gave a brief synopsis of kind of what you do, but you can tell it better than I can. So give us a little snippet of who is Jacob?
That's always a very loaded question.
It's huge.
I literally have "Who am I" tattooed on my on my arm here, just as a reminder that I'm always evolving and always changing. So I do really struggle with kind of answering that question of this like elevator pitch about who I am and what I do, because it is very evolving. I've done a lot over my days, and I would say one of the first things that kind of comes to mind, I'm a holistic hustler.
Yeah.
I do a lot, and it's all within this realm of like health and wellness and kind of lifestyle businesses. But I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a brother, I'm a fiance, I'm a son, and all those don't necessarily fully identify me, but I kind of play those roles currently. And yeah, I think I'm currently trying to figure out things that I enjoy, trying to let go of some of the stories that have created kind of this version, which I'm grateful for, but at the same time, who I grow into and who I might identify in the future needs to let go of some of those things.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm a gym owner, cafe owner, coffee shop owner. So there's a lot there.
Do it all.
There's a lot that I do. Yeah.
You do it all.
Yeah. So
What has your journey this far into self-discovery, healing, what has been the biggest part of your journey?
I would say entrepreneurship has contributed to a lot of the growth, and why I'm so close to it is because I feel like it's just one of those things that's relentless in teaching you lessons and problem solving.
Absolutely.
And just realizing that, over time, I'll kind of refer back to, these stories that we have and how they shape me. Like a lot of the things that got me into, say, entrepreneurship and seeking discomfort and challenge was that, this idea that success had to be hard, so I always seemed to find the hardest path. And if I believe that story, I'm going to continue to like chase things that are really difficult. And after probably, what has it been, close to 12, 13 years, being self-employed and an entrepreneur in different, businesses, I'm coming to realize that it's not necessarily the case. It doesn't need to be that way, and when I would see other people that are just kind of more fluid in how they operated and not trying to force every single situation and control every single outcome, that they've found success too. And maybe it is just from the outside looking in that it looked easier from how I found success. But at any rate, I'm trying to let go of that story that, hustle culture, grind culture is the only way to get it.
Yeah.
That there's a whole nother way of like letting go and letting things come to you and staying abundant, that can produce success, so, I think that's probably one of the biggest things is like letting go of the outcomes, and trying to really control them.
Yeah.
And it is tricky though, because, I found a lot of success in doing that, and kind of like, there's a lot of, manifestation, but also like, I like to think of it as like manifest action, where it's like, you have this idea of things and you're open to them, but there's this action that you actually have to take to make these things, come to life. And I've done pretty well in like trying to control this narrative and like waiting in the cut, having this idea of this conversation that I'm going to have when this opportunity presents itself, and then boom, I do it. And then it kind of turns into what I had anticipated. And then I feel like, oh, I'm moving the needle. I'm the one doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
But, I've been smacked a couple times when it doesn't really work out the way that I wanted it to as well. And, those are tough. So,
yeah, I think there's a fine line of finding that, the balance. And then, like you said, the actual taking action part, because you can have these instances of manifestation and you really can create whatever it is that you desire, but there is a flow that comes to it. And sometimes that does look like taking action. And then sometimes that looks like stepping back and allowing things to happen.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is something that you've recently discovered, or how many years into entrepreneurship did you start to realize that?
I would say kind of getting through COVID and really towards the end of last year. So what was that, 2023? Because I was like really trying to muscle through COVID, because I going into COVID, I had a lot of businesses under me and it was wild. And, watching people move through through COVID and like early COVID, business owners that may have had a different past experience and knowing what to do in a situation like, so there's a lot of places that decided to like close like a month in, 2 months in, and I hadn't, that was no part of like, I had no idea even how to do that. So all I did was like really buckle down and grind, and I thought that grinding through the thing was gonna get me through it. But no, like if I would have just slowed down and maybe asked for help, things would have been a lot easier for me. So that was I think when I had that much discomfort and that much pain through those years of trying to figure it out, is really what forced me to look at a different route. There's a lot of things that wrapped up in that made those years challenging, and shine the light on all sorts of different holes that I needed to work on, like delegation, even like deeper rooted fears that really became evident in like fear of abandonment. All of these certain things played out in my role in relationships with employees and how I treated everybody around me, and ultimately made those years of COVID very challenging, and where I had all this stuff, but I wasn't able to like fully delegate or ask of my employees to like step up and do these certain things, because there were these underlying fears of like, if I did, they're going to leave me and it's going to be even more challenging to kind of get through these things.
Wow.
So there was a lot of, just shining the light on these challenges that I was facing, and ultimately led me to, selling off certain businesses, letting some go, in an effort to kind of get to this like blank slate of like, okay, if you're going to be able to work on these things, you need to give yourself as much space from them in order to, like if you're just constantly in this scarce feeling, like you can't work on yourself in that, you're going to default back to your certain like coping mechanisms to deal with those things, right? So like, creating space is a big part of that, which I've pretty much spent 2024 like with creating space, which has been a big growth year, not necessarily in like business, but in just getting comfortable with not doing a lot. I still have, some businesses in Seattle that even in that was like trying to separate myself from a little bit so that I could, operate differently. So, yeah.
Creating that space is so important. And I think that a lot of times we can think that when we start to create this space or we start to distance ourselves from our goals or the things that we're working towards, it can be seen as a failure to ourselves. But in reality, it's one of the best things that you can do for yourself.
Yeah.
And when you are able to have that space to work through things on your own, then you are able to show up better for others, or you
definitely
are able to show up more authentically. So
Yeah.
what do you feel like you've had any specific modalities that have helped you in that space to start to work through some of those things?
I mean, for me, it's been breath work or just awareness of the breath and understanding how breath influences our nervous system. So when I think about creating space, like there's this like physical thing of creating space, but for me, it's creating space from these default reactions that I might have. And you do that by understanding what your reactions are when you are triggered and in the sympathetic state and fearful, and how you can choose to react when you are in a calmer state. So space to me is kind of like just literally thinking about my nervous system and calming myself down in certain situations and understanding how the breath does that. So a lot of like what I do now and what I think about is how I'm breathing. And, in this world of wellness and different like services and practices, breathwork is a very well-known thing these days, but it's usually when you think about breathwork and when you talk to people about breathwork, it's this whole, hour-long session of like laying down and, maybe sound baths are included. And it's like this whole thing. But for me, it's all the moments in between those. It's every single day, that I try to think about it. And when I'm not thinking about it, I'm probably getting pushed around by my environment and what's happening around me. Because those two things are not necessarily opposite sides of the coin, but when you're not consciously thinking about your breath, it's part of our autonomic nervous system. So it's going to be breathing for you, and it's going to be breathing for you based off all the inputs that are coming at it through the environment, through things that are happening around you. So when you take a moment and you think about your breath, you're now more mindful of it, and you can now influence your environment by changing your perception, that your perception is largely created by your nervous system and the state that you find yourself in. So that's why I like to think about breath work just being more of like this, 18 hours that you're awake or whatever it might be. And thinking about your breath is like the work and staying, conscious and tapped in,
Yeah, continuing that practice no matter where you are, what situation that you're in.
Yeah.
For me, when you and I first met, it was at Space Bar, and when you had Space Bar in Pasadena. And it was through a cold plunge session.
Yeah.
And the breath work, I had no idea how powerful breath work could be. And I think for me, that was the first time that I really realized how powerful your breath can be.
Yeah.
And the way that you were able to guide me in getting in this cold plunge, in my head, I was like, I can't do this. Like you just said 3 minutes. What? I can't do that, And then when I was able to calm my nervous system through my breath, 3 minutes felt like nothing.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful. And that was when I was really inspired to continue doing the breath work and practicing it, like you said, not just in times of challenge, but in times of feeling frustrated or stressed or anxious.
Yeah.
And it's become really powerful for me.
I mean, it's a game changer. And that's why, I really lean on cold plunges as the practice. And it's, most of what we do with cold plunges is less about like getting cold, and it's more about like really giving people the opportunity to see how powerful the breath is in that. So I like to think of it more as like a breath work test, because it's super empowering. People can connect that dots, and it's like, that's part of my frustration with the whole sauna and cold plunge like business offering that you see everywhere. It's that it's less about that. Yep. Most of these people that are even opening businesses don't even really understand it, So being able to continue to showcase that through different workshops or over at our space, whether it's Space Bar or Mohawk Wellness, is the real power in it. You know, like I'm all for having some fun and just doing like cold plunges and having like a hangout. But the real impact and what really fills me up is when people step out of it super confident, because they just literally unlocked a new tool that is a true game changer. Because if you can do it there, you can do it in traffic, and you can do it everywhere. You can do it where it really matters. Not that traffic is the expression of that, but relationships, you know, how you interact with your kids, all of that is really the area of opportunity there. And people start realizing that like the anxiety and the things that they struggle with day in and day out that influences every component of their day doesn't need to be that way.
Elevated.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, you know, 1 or 2 ice baths isn't going to be the fix, especially if you're super anxious. It's going to take a lot of practice, but it at least shows that you're capable of doing it. You know, like even at, you know, your last retreat, you know, the differences in between people and how they interact with this. I mean, a lot of it has to do with, you know, the story that they're telling themselves about cold or whatever it might be. But the people that are like the toughest cookies to crack in there can still do it, you know, and you can see how confident and inspired people are. You know, they might not be so willing to jump right back in and do it again, but they did something that they didn't think that they could. And that might express itself in doing something else that they didn't think they could, go talking to the person that they're nervous to talk to, go get the job that they don't think that they're deserving of, or whatever it might be. Like it's going to have a trickle down effect in so many different areas in your life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think that it relates to the breath work and the mastering of your breath relates to that mental toughness?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that get us to cave mentally are just stories and narratives that we tell ourselves that we can't do it, or, you know, this is never going to end, whatever it might be, or like we're stuck in this moment in time in our life, things are never going to get better. That catastrophic type of thinking and self-talk is because you're in a fear-based kind of state. Your nervous system is triggered, and that voice in your head, it becomes very catastrophic to protect you, and it's not a bad thing. It's there to protect you. However, you know, the living in the world that we live in, it's that sensor and that alarm is being triggered for not real threats. So by using that breath and calming yourself down, you can be more supportive. You can look at things a little more rationally and logically, and then talk yourself into whatever it is that you need to do. And the ice bath is probably one of the best ways to kind of see how that is, because, you know, you're in this water, the water, the temperature of the water is not necessarily changing. It's the same thing. You know, you're sitting in there, and you'll see how when you lose your breath, how you talk to yourself. You're like, get out of the ice bath. I'm never going to feel my hands. All of these things to like get you to actually act and move. And when you're calm, the time passes slower. You're able to like be more supportive to yourself, you know, tell yourself that this is going to end soon. And those are different parts of your brain that are doing that. You know, it's your like limbic system, your lizard brain, the thing we've had, you know, ever since, you know, we were just kind of the dumbest of creatures and just had to like respond to our environment to, you know, literally not get eaten. That will kick on when we're in this like super fear-based mode. But if we can stay calm, we can keep some more of our rational thinking in play and again, be more in tune to what's actually going on, and not that we're like drowning in a frozen lake, like we're sitting in this tub, like we're fine, you know? So you really get a good look at how these voices change in your head, and they literally shape how you see the world, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I have an interesting question. So I noticed myself, for many years was very anxious. And of course, I still have some of those tendencies. So on days that I experience that I am a little bit more anxious and I do get in the cold plunge, it's so much harder for me. I can still master it and I can still work through my breath. But how does our nervous system create that almost in our body that it makes it harder?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's kind of like this idea of like willpower. You know, if you can muscle something for a certain amount of time, but eventually you're going to kind of your tank is going to run out. And you're going to, if you're like really trying to avoid sweets and you're just avoiding them and avoiding them, eventually you're going to eat an abundance of sweets. Right. So it's kind of that same idea where if you're already anxious and nervous, you're going to have less flexibility within your nervous system. So it's tougher to calm down. It's similar to the kind of like your HRV, your heart rate variability. So depending on if you are familiar and wearing monitors or whatever it might be, or if you're going to get sick or anything like that, your heart rate becomes less variable, which just means that you have less like flexibility. So you want to be able to go into a heightened state and you want to be able to calm down. You want this like flexibility. But if you're getting sick or you're always anxious, you become less adaptable, I guess. And it's a lot harder to calm yourself down. So whether you're anxious, whether you got into a fight, or whether you're maybe about to be sick, all of those things are influencing your nervous system, and you're just less flexible to be able to calm yourself down. So that goes to say whether it's an ice bath, or goes to say, going into a job interview or going into like a tough conversation with your partner, all of those same things are the same. So like we like to think of these different stressors as different, as like, ice bath, hard training session, interview for a tough job, as if these are different. Our body doesn't recognize any of those things as different. So the point is like, if you are going into an ice bath and you're realizing like, damn, this is harder to recover from if I'm anxious. If you were to go into a job interview the same way, like it's going to be like, oh, this is hard for me to calm down and answer in the way that I need to answer. So I think that's one of like the best things to remember, is that the body does not care about what the stressor is. It does not know what the stressor is. So just finding a stressor that is like pretty extreme. It doesn't need to be an ice bath. It can be a cold shower. It can be something. But finding a stressor that's safe for you to practice calming down is the game changer there. And it is going to allow you to do that. So I'd much rather have somebody go and do this in the ice bath and learn this versus like, testing this in like real world situations that might not end well.
Absolutely.
So.
For sure. I have been able to witness you share your passion for breathwork and regulating your nervous system in many different environments, which I think is so cool. And your passion really shines through. And my question for you is, what made you decide that you wanted to share this passion? How did you get into sharing this passion?
I think it has a lot to do with me trying to solve my own problems. Like this is like, I'm passionate about not making the same mistakes that I've made in the past. And a lot of the times I don't believe that I'm even capable of solving that for myself. But when I have somebody in front of me, I believe that they can, and I want to instill that belief even if they can't. So if I can get them to kind of use this tool that has been so impactful for me, and provide that information and knowledge to them, to know that they can kind of solve their problems as well, is like super empowering. Absolutely. And it's so accessible. Like I see people spending a lot of money on things that aren't necessarily going to solve their problem. So like providing a tool that they carry with them already and they always have, and just like showing them how to use it a little bit more is super exciting for me. Absolutely. It's not that, just because, big part of it roots in my ability and desire to change myself. And if I can have other people kind of working on themselves too, while I'm working on mine, like even in my very tight, circle of whether it's my partner or whatever it might be, it gives me hope, it gives me hope that we can change and grow and evolve. And it's just a very accessible tool. So, and a lot of people don't realize it or know it. And, they think that their problems are just so challenging and so hard to solve, and they need this prescription in order to get right with themselves, or they need to lean on alcohol, or they need to lean on other soothing mechanisms versus just like soothing themselves with the breath, you know, not to shame anybody that is doing that currently, but it's just like, I want people to know that, you know, there's other options out there, and it's a very accessible one, and it doesn't cost anything.
Absolutely. You know? Yeah. It's a very healthy coping mechanism. And like you said, it's so easily accessible. I mean, we have it at all points in time. It's readily at our hands, and it's something that can be practiced any and everywhere.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I think that sharing that with as many people as possible and sharing it with our community and hoping that it continues to extend and grow is also just a way to help everybody in smaller communities, larger communities start to regulate themselves, their nervous systems, and eventually just create more peace all around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, because like I remember when I was younger and I was a kid, man, I could not control my emotions at all, you know, and, you know, thinking back now, like it was wild, you know, and it led to a lot of, you know, a lot of things that I still deal with today, you know, where like even like I can't put this on, you know, the 8-year-old version of me, but hypothetically, had I had this tool to calm down, a lot of the things that I struggle with today probably wouldn't have happened, you know? So like, again, I can't blame that kid, but like I've had a lot of like recent conversations and a lot of like thinking of like, man, where is this attachment, and like where is this fear of abandonment coming from? And I've zeroed it down to like one particular situation, and it wasn't like with my parents or anything. It was like at a new school that I went to, like in first grade.
Wow.
And there was this moment where I was like I was just like crying that my mom was leaving me at this school, could not regulate my feelings. I was just like very emotional. So they buddied me up with a friend, you know, and as soon as that first recess came, he left to go play, and I was there by myself again. And I just was like so fearful and just like crying and crying.
Wow.
That snowballed into this whole personality thing that I created or whatever it was. So point being, had I just been able to like calm down, or somebody approached me, a teacher approached me and gave me this tool of breathing to calm down, I wouldn't have created this whole scenario of like being fearful of being left and abandoned, which I still, you know, struggle with today as like one of my bigger fears. So like it really is a game changer, and I would love to, you know, be able to show kids how to do this and calm down. And it's, you know, someday when I do have a family of my own and kids, like I think it's the tool that I will be the most stoked to share with them, you know, because you never know, you know, how impactful it can be.
Yeah. Have you thought about, you know, I know that you've started to, or you've continued to build your community here and also in Seattle. Have you considered expanding that to the youth?
Yeah, so currently I do have a friend of mine that has a nonprofit called Better Today, Better Tomorrow, and he works with a lot of like foster children, but and through sport as well. But the ultimate goal is to you know, empower and build confidence within those kids, and you know, a lot of over the past few weeks, I have been going to some schools with him. And, you know, the first day I went in, I didn't think, I was just going to go like observe a little bit and like play with the kids. Like we play soccer or whatever it might be. And he just kind of throws me straight into it. There's like 20 kids there. And he's like, okay, we're going to sit down. We're going to breathe. And like, you know, these kids are like,
what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, okay. So this is what we're going to do. But they were actually receptive to it. You know, it wasn't like a 20-minute breathwork session.
Right.
But I was just trying to tell them and get them to connect with like those feelings of anger and imagining, you know, just calming down, you know, and it went well. Actually, they were able to like breathe through it and follow along. So that was inspiring, you know. So maybe over the next few weeks and as time passes, like progress that and see how that goes, because it's a game changer, you know.
It's incredible, and I think it is so important. Just your childhood experience is a perfect example of how impactful breath work or having these different coping mechanisms can be. You know, as kids, we really weren't taught any of these tools. And they are so beneficial because now that we have these tools, we're able to better understand, but we're still having to work through a lot of these traumas and things that we went through. And I think that it is so important to be able to spread it to the youth and teach them these tools that they can carry with them and allow them to just function through life better.
Definitely. I mean, because a lot of the challenges comes in like communication, and we can't communicate if we're in that super heightened state. So we can't really tell people what it is that we're going through or feeling, because things become very narrow and things become very limited. And if you're staying in that space, you know, things get out of hand. You know, you say things that you don't necessarily say, you act in a way that you aren't very proud of, and, you know, you don't get too many chances in this life. Like if you really slip up, you know, say, again, you assault somebody because you're angry or whatever it might be. Like how many lives are ruined or set off this gnarly trajectory because of this like crime of passion or this out of anger, you know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, we're not going to solve the world's problems necessarily with it, but like you can definitely solve a few individual issues. You
Absolutely.
know? And,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's through childhood or now. Like it's that relevant now, right? It's like we still get in these heightened states, and we still get upset and triggered by, you know, our relationships or whatever it is. And, you know, every single day there's an opportunity to like create that space and respond in a different way.
Yeah. For those who maybe don't practice breath work, what is a simple technique that they can start to use at home or when they are feeling stressed out or anxious or frustrated?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, like slowing the breath down, extending exhales are going to increase heart rate variability and calm you down a little bit. So the general rule of thumb is that slow your breath down, calm it down. And the thing is that when you are super heightened, it's hard just to go straight into that. So just think of things almost like a gear system, and where like imagine, I mean, again, we'll bring it back to the ice bath or a cold shower, or anytime you've gotten to cold water. It's a really good example of where your breath goes when you're very frightened, I guess. It's very short, shallow, very fast breathing. So if that's this like high end gear, and slow nasal breathing in your belly is like the very slow gear, you just want to move it down the spectrum to that slow thing. But if you were to go to try to attempt to do like a box breath of 4 seconds in, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, 4-second hold, you would create more stress and anxiety. So gradually just try to get control over your breath and slowing it down. And again, yeah, the cold is like the great way to like show what that looks like. I guess another example would be like if you're working out and you're doing a very intense like bout of cardio or something, and you notice you're having to breathe like very hard at the end of it. That's like another example of like where you could learn to slow it down and kind of get back to this nasal breathing. So those are both very similar scenarios, so both opportunities to practice this down regulation of breathing. So yeah, those are great opportunities. I like also to like have a heart rate monitor and tie an actual visual like feedback to the breath. So maybe if you are, you don't necessarily, like maybe you're not the type to meditate or do all that. Maybe you're more like, I think I bridge the gap a little bit because I don't necessarily look like your typical breathwork facilitator or whatever it might be, that I like to bring in a little bit more of the science and the data behind it. And something that was really helpful for me is to look at my heart and to know that this is actually working. So maybe get a heart rate monitor and go through different types of breathing, or even just like training where your heart rate monitor, and then practice lowering your heart rate.
Wow.
Like this is intuitive to us also. So just having something to monitor. And if your goal is to, let me see how low I can lower my heart rate, you'll know what breath to do. Like if I presented that challenge and you put on a heart rate monitor and you started going like you're going to know real quickly, oh shit, no, my heart rate's getting faster, obviously, and this heart rate is increasing on my watch. Okay, that doesn't calm me down. Like intuitively, you'll know what breath it is that calms you down.
Right.
You just might need some like real time feedback in order to like witness that, and also to acknowledge how powerful it is. You know, so like
awareness.
doing it in the ice bath was really cool for me. Like when Whoop first came out, I had a Whoop, and I would like put my phone up at the edge of the ice bath, and then I'd keep my wrist out because it would, you know, the water was so cold that it would turn off the heart rate monitor, and then I would just like play a game of like see how low I can drop my heart rate. And I mean, it's pretty impressive because like you'll see it like real time. First, you'll like hear a little. Your heart rate will increase if you're like not focusing on your breath, and then you'll start hearing the voice in your head like getting a little bit harsher, you know, and then you'll see it go up faster and faster. So like literally is this like visual game tied to like your breathing that you can actually see it. So for me, it was like a really great way to be like, damn, this is like super like powerful. Like this is literally happening. You know, like fingers on a remote control, and I'm just like turning up the volume or turning down the volume. So for some people, I think that would be really helpful to see it actually. Like if you're not super in tune to how you're feeling, you can visually see your heart rate drop, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. And then it can be applied to all instances where your heart rate is,
For sure.
is heightened for sure. Yeah. That's so interesting. As far as your practices go, do you have any routines either in the morning or the evening that are non-negotiables for you that you have to practice in order to continue to take care of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, and they've evolved based off of like what's going on in my world. So, you know, if I go back to those moments of like COVID and trying to keep all these businesses alive, like first off, every single morning I'd wake up with like gnarly anxiety and like these voices in my head of like, damn, what do I got to do? How am I going to solve this problem? It was just like constant, like life or death problem solving is what it felt like. So like super early in the morning, I'd be waking up at like 3:30 or 4, not because I'm like, oh, I'm going to go conquer the day. I'm like, damn, how am I going to survive this day? And you can't go and operate customer service oriented, like brick and mortar businesses have employees in that state, you know? So it became, how do I get to a baseline? How do I put a smile on my face? How do I lead with like optimism in these like dark times? So for me, it was, you know, I've done it all in regards to like, okay, let me try to write these thoughts down. Let me get to the journal mode. Let me go for a walk. Let me shake this energy out. Let me go grab a coffee. So it was really trying to stick to that routine and dedicating at least a little bit of time to myself, because as soon as I would step out into the world, like everything was about everybody else constantly. Right. So that was super impactful in those moments. Now that life is a little less chaotic and I just feel in a, you know, way better headspace, I'm not waking up that early, and I'll even like push back on the whole, you got to wake up at 4 a.m. thing and dedicate this time. Like depending on what your life is like you don't necessarily have to do that, right? I think the overarching theme here is to find some time for yourself to reflect and whatever that might be. But for me, I've also felt very isolated at times, not because I don't have a lot of people around me that do love me and, you know, are supportive, but just a lot of the times the way that I think and I observe situations, I feel removed from a lot of the things that are happening from me, because I'm just like trying to figure everything out. So that's pulled me away from a lot of like social situations or like being of the world and enjoying the things around me. So like for me right now, somewhat of a non-negotiable is putting myself out into the world and like experiencing it a little bit more. So like now I still wake up and I go for a walk and grab coffee, but it's more with the intention of like just being out, not necessarily going and like talking to everybody and connecting, but like having an experience to enjoy, you know, that, that has been great for me, you know? So I spent a lot of money on coffee, you know, and it has literally nothing to do with the coffee. I got an espresso machine at the house. I got coffee at the house, but being out in the world and observing and taking in information and having conversations and doing all that is like a non-negotiable for me. And then beyond that, working out has been key. So even those things have changed a little bit, where it's a lot more aerobic work now and endurance based, and less in the gym and less strength training. I mean, we still do this 2 or 3 days a week, but it's a lot more of this like well-rounded program. And yeah, those things, I mean, again, like are game changers, you know, because it does allow us to breathe, and it allows me to practice even more breath work through action, through movement. Yeah, so I would say those are the non-negotiables right now. But I don't also necessarily beat myself up these days when they don't happen.
Yeah. It's more for you. It's for the benefit of you.
For sure.
Understanding that. You've been running marathons, right?
I did an ultra marathon relay with some of my employees and my brother and some of our crew up in Seattle. That was pretty dope. It was 38 miles, and that was brutal. I did a pretty enduring hike this past weekend, which is a challenge.
Okay.
I do like the endurance stuff, just because it's another form of like hearing these voices in your head, you know, and knowing as you move through these challenging situations to not necessarily believe that voice, you know, because you get really familiar now with these states that you find yourself in, and you know these states are going to pass, and that's, I think, truly what allows you to endure. I mean, life is a long, enduring process. There's a lot of ups and downs, and if we solely listen to, you know, our voices when we're in these challenging situations, you know, it becomes pretty tough. So I think that's why I'm leaning towards more enduring bouts, is because it seems very real world, and allows me to like flex these tools that I've been working on.
Absolutely.
So it's been good. And I mean, it kind of sucks now that my whole like algorithm and feed is about these like endurance like bouts, because when the marathon used to be this like thing that you can really like celebrate, now I'm seeing all these 100-mile runs and these like 250-mile runs to the desert, and it's like, damn, that's what we got to do right now.
Right. You're like, oh, that's where the bar is.
When was the marathon? Like marathon ain't nothing nowadays. But yeah.
But how incredible that it's just another form of mastery of your breath, of your mind, of the challenges that you face.
Sure.
And I think it's so powerful to be able to use your breath and use it to empower you.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and just having this like capable physical body right now is like something I haven't had in a long time. I mean, a lot of my story is also like rooted in like this herniated disc that I like struggled through for like 7-8 years, you know. So having this body and knowing that like that I can physically push myself through these different things is, you know, it's a blessing, you know, and I want to maintain that as I continue to get older.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. So as an entrepreneur, what is some advice that you would give to another entrepreneur or aspiring?
I think one of the biggest things is to let go of the outcome, which is like really, really challenging, right? We're going in entrepreneurship to kind of, I guess, change our situation a lot of the times. So giving up a little bit of that, I know is hard. And also that these things aren't going to come in like a linear fashion. Success doesn't happen linearly. Like there's a lot of roadblocks. So getting comfortable with adapting and reframing and remembering why you got into something in the first place, and just staying true to that. And personally, just knowing that not every opportunity you need to take.
Absolutely.
You know, and like it seems that way, right? Because maybe a lot of times we get into entrepreneurship to, you know, again, change our situation because we don't feel like we have much opportunity. So we need to say yes to things, which I do also suggest, like you have to say yes. You're never going to change your situations if you don't say yes. But at some point, those yeses can become problematic and distract you from the ultimate goal. And just because others did it a certain way doesn't mean that's going to work for you. And I think that's a big one that also for myself is like, you're looking, you're trying to learn lessons. I've always struggled with the idea of like getting a mentor for myself, just because I'm a very, I wouldn't say hard headed, but like I need to figure things out for myself. And I'd rather like take these losses and struggle through it. And this is kind of going back to this idea of like, things need to be harder than they need to be. But I've really struggled with like taking on a mentor or even like hiring consultants, because they're not me. They haven't had my experiences or lived my experiences. They may have come close to it or lived an experience of theirs that was somewhat similar, but their solutions aren't always going to solve my solutions. So being just willing to take those L's and learning through them is hugely important. It's kind of the whole thing, it's the whole point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and what you're describing is finding that alignment within yourself and who am I and what does my business stand for?
Yeah.
Does it stand for all of the things that I believe in, all of my values, and recognizing all of those values and being solid in them. And along with that goes you don't have to say yes to everything, because does this align with what I'm trying to build and what I'm trying to create? And the same goes for mentors as well. I think that a lot of times there are people who have our best interest at heart, but their best interest looks different than what our actual best interest is.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's hard to discern between those things.
Yeah.
But I think that, like you said, having that foundation within yourself and understanding that the losses are going to happen, you have to be willing to accept them and face the challenges.
Yeah, I think a great person to have around is somebody that's going to ask you questions and push back on your thought processes and what you want to do, so because like one of the goals, so there's entrepreneurship, which is like going through life and trying to figure things out for yourself and like get yours and like take these lessons along the way, like this very growth type of mindset. And then there's also like making money, like if you just want to make money. So like getting clear on what it is that you want to ultimately create and figure that out, right? Because if it is to be successful and make money, there's different things that you might want to do. So like one of the things that I've just personally struggled with is that all my businesses are like health and wellness related and have stemmed from me trying to solve things for myself. So these are like very passionate things, which becomes very challenging when now you step into this world of like business with these passions. Because those two things are almost conflicting, whereas like, how do you do right by people when you're now in this like capitalistic world and you need to make a business out of it? It's a very challenging thing to do. Because business is a lot about margins and making, and being sustainable in that. So just getting really clear on the life that you want to build and the business that you want to build, and know that there are trade-offs. Like if you want to be like super altruistic and you need to know that that's probably going to come at a cost of like probably less money, just because those are kind of different values a little bit to a certain extent. They push on each other a little bit. And that's still something I'm kind of figuring out today. And I realize that if I do want to kind of play more of this like altruistic like role in business, that the business in and of itself needs to really change. Like I can't go into a business with a brick and mortar space that has like a $50,000 like hard expense that I need to cover every single month, because now it's like, okay, in order to help, there's a lot of people being helped, but it's not sustainable. Right. So like, that's what I've kind of gone through over these past years. Like if I really want to help people and like share these practices, I need to put myself in the most abundant space possible, and knowing that like the pressure of covering rent and payroll and all these things pulls me out of that. Why would I recreate that? I've been blessed in some of my previous early businesses that allows me to like sustain and like my essentially passive income that allows me that flexibility to do that now. So I'm in a bit of an abundant state to try to recreate this new project at Mohawk Wellness Collective, with this like idea of like, okay, let's try to maintain this level like of expense so that we can stay true to like helping people and not feel compromised that we got to make this like other decision to get the money, you know? And it's hard to stick with that because again, I'm still operating off of like some levels of scarcity where like it pulls me back to like the hell I know is better than the hell that I don't, right? Or the heaven that I don't know. Like, so I pull back into this like this mode of like, oh, I got to build this thing in order for these people to want to come to this thing. And then like, I'm like, oh, that's exactly how I got into these other situations of these like big ass build outs and, you know, I'm able to like somewhat pump the brakes on that. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I have everything that I need to have the impact I want to give just in my head and through my experiences. That building a new deck and buying another ice bath isn't going to solve any of that. It's just this thing that I feel like if I build it, they will come type of thing. Where it's like, no, I have everything. I can help a ton of people without me actually spending any money.
Right.
It's about getting comfortable and believing that I'm worthy enough in doing that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that would be, I guess back to your question, like advice to an entrepreneur is like, what do you want to actually create? Because these other things that you think is going to put you in the position to do that might just be a huge liability.
Absolutely.
And take you away from your ultimate goal, you know?
Yeah. So understanding the risks that you're taking as you move into business, for sure. What are some ways, maybe if any, do you enjoy reading books? Do you enjoy listening to podcasts? And if so, what are some different books or podcasts that you recommend to continue education?
Yeah. I mean, I've gone through a lot of reading. I mean, most of them would kind of be self-help style of books. Some of the more impactful ones, I would say, would be, this isn't necessarily a self-help book, but The Alchemist was a very prominent one for me. Just because, I mean, just realizing that, we're kind of all on our own journey here has been something that I've struggled with a little bit over the past years. Like, I'm very player one centric sometimes, where I'm like, oh man, like I'm the one moving the needle here. I'm the one doing this. And sometimes, relationships that I create is in an effort to help me do the thing that I'm doing. Right. And it's like, so like a reminder of like, everybody's on their journey and everyone's their own player one, and like letting go of certain things that I'm really attached to so people can fulfill their dreams. I mean, just remember reading that. It was like kind of slapped me in the face a little bit. But in regards to like podcasts, I cycle through a bit of them. I also realize that I've gained a lot of the times too much information that gets in the way of certain things. And has been somewhat hindering. I was like, oh, I need to know this. I need to know this still. When I already know probably too much,
right.
And it's
information overload.
But I mean, I just listened to a Huberman podcast that was pretty impactful. So I'm pretty selective. I'm not going to go and like listen to them all, but one of the most recent podcasts that he had was like really, really impactful. It was like a futurist was on there. So this guy just talking about like thinking about the long game and brought up that like we've kind of swung a little bit too far to this like idea of being present. And we're not really taking like some of our past experiences and like putting them, on paper and being strategic with how we're going to help this influence our future, which, I related to a lot, but yeah, I'm trying to push back on the knowledge right now and reading a lot. But a book that I did recently pick up also was about like permission to feel. So like, I think I'm trying to find things that are very relevant to problems I'm trying to solve.
Absolutely.
So this particular book was about finding the vocabulary to describe your feelings and your emotions.
Oh, that's huge.
And I mean, especially for men, like I don't want to bring everything back to the ice bath, but it's like when you are allowed to only feel a certain types of way, you're really missing out on a whole other side of like coping, So like in the perfect example is like, we're allowed to be angry and mad, and that doesn't really solve your problems, right? So it's like, you'll see that in the ice. Someone will just like fight. A lot of guys will just like fight it and like fight versus like letting go, because they weren't provided the tools. So we're using like a vocabulary as a tool to communicate. We don't know how to describe our feelings outside of just being angry or mad, when it's like, realistically, we're probably hurt or fearful, and we don't know how to like communicate that, like say in a relationship. So things kind of like snowball. So this is very relevant to me in my relationship, is that I feel like we don't have a very big vocabulary around how we're feeling. So when she's describing something to me, and she says stressed, I get triggered, and I'm like, stress, like, dude, live my past 4 years and talk to me about stress. Like immediately I go into this like, kind of a bit of I'm not creating space in that moment, right? And it's going to lead to like me not allowing her just to like express herself, because I'm hearing this word stress, and that stress doesn't mean the same to me. Right. And then it just becomes like this ridiculous like bickering that doesn't need to happen. Unnecessary. So I'm like, okay, let me read this. Let me see how this all relates to me, and like where I lack the vocabulary, which is huge. And then if I understand, like I don't have the best vocabulary around these feelings or emotions, then, she probably doesn't have the right vocabulary either. It's like getting to a shared language to actually know what we're actually saying would prevent a lot of like unnecessary, arguing.
Absolutely.
Or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And being able to properly understand your feelings so that you can properly articulate them, it's huge in communication. If we're not able to properly articulate how we're feeling, how could we possibly communicate it to somebody else? So I think that's really powerful. I love that you're diving into that.
Yeah, I think that's what, hopefully that's what all these books and podcasts are for, is to try to apply these tools to solve some of our problems.
Exactly. Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't spoken on that you would like to share?
No, I think we touched base on a lot of it. I think my wish for a lot of people is just to be curious about, themselves and how they respond to certain things. And as we talked about, like gaining knowledge and gaining information is great, but it's like the applied knowledge and the applied information to yourself that's going to really have the impact. And don't sleep on the nervous system. Like it's literally everything. It's how you view the world. It's the lens that you view the world in, and find something challenging so that you can actually witness that on your time and like under your control, so that you're not, practicing that in like really like life-changing ways.
Absolutely.
So if you haven't gotten into a cold plunge, I would say take that intention into it. And it's not just some fad that looks cool and that everyone's doing. Like a big part of it maybe appears that way, but when you bring this type of intention to it, it can really like change your life, And again, it's not the cold that's changing your life. It's the intention of being curious, to get to know your nervous system and how it relates to all of your outward expression, and your inner voice too. So hop in that cold.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, where can people find you, both here in Seattle?
Yeah, mainly Echo Park is the neighborhood that I don't really leave these days. And this whole like entrepreneurship, like creating this lifestyle has been something I've been working towards. And it's a rare opportunity to be in LA and be in a neighborhood that you don't need to drive and live. So Echo Park, you'll see me on those streets. Mohawk Wellness Collective is the latest project, which is a space that we're going to be doing ice baths, saunas, and breathwork. But we really, really want to open the space up to other facilitators to come in, do their thing. And this is also has come to be based off of my past experiences with businesses, where feeling like I needed to shoulder everything. But it doesn't need to be that way. I can go and I can do the thing that I feel most passionate about, is teaching breathwork, teaching cold plunges, teaching some discomfort in the sauna, and other people can come join forces and have access to the space, have access to this community, and truly grow a community, not because I need this community to sustain us, because I've created an opportunity for myself right now in order to just grow the community. Sure, there's some expenses, but the expenses have been minimized so that I don't feel this pressure of like getting pulled out of alignment in that. But if you are in the Pacific Northwest, also Seattle, we have Space Bar Wellness up there where we do cold plunge, sauna, same thing that I'm talking about, coach sessions. We have the Fit Bar Superfood Cafe. It's an acai bowl shop and health conscious coffee shop. So we check that out. And then we do own a couple of Anytime Fitnesses up in the Seattle area too. So go get your workout in. Checking all the bases. Go and support me.
For sure.
That'd be awesome.
So people can find you on Instagram at Mohawk Wellness Collective.
Mohawk Wellness Collective, or personally at Cub_Saldana. Tap in. We'd love to connect. If anything that we talked about resonated, come and holler at me. I'd love to have a conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your experiences, and just being vulnerable today. I really appreciate you. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I've appreciated all the times you come and supported and hung out at Shiver Lake doing some cold plunge sauna.
Yeah.
Excited to participate in one of your sound baths here soon.
Yeah, we're doing a collaboration event on the 15th.
On the 15th of November. Harvest Moon.
Yep. Full moon. We're going to be doing a sound bath. So if you are in the LA area, come through.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
It'll be fun.
All right. Well, beautiful. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.